Hello and welcome everyone to another demo quick look from TGS. I know I said I'd bang all of these videos out pretty much a day or two after each other. Unfortunately, I did catch a bit of a cold, so I couldn't really record. That being said, if this is the first video of the TGS demo quick looks that I'm doing, then by all means check out the other two. Those being Valkyrie Elysium, a game that is surprisingly closer to character action than I would have thought, and the new Star Ocean, which I haven't covered yet, but will be coming up next. As for this video with Wolong, I feel like this video might end up coming out a little bit shorter than the other two. I didn't dislike the game, but it was also kind of disappointing. And I feel like that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from a lot of people, since I barely even realized this game existed until the demo dropped. For those who don't know, Wolong is basically Team Ninja's next Nioh / Dark Souls style game. That being said, they have changed things up a little bit this time, focusing more on Chinese rather than Japanese mythology. And there's new additions and changes to the gameplay that kind of separate it from Nioh a bit more outside of just the setting. If Nioh is like Team Ninja's Dark Souls and then Strangers of Paradise is their sort of Bloodborne, then Wolong is kinda like their Sekiro. There's now a dedicated jump button, and the level design is sort of catered towards that mechanic, being a lot more open and explorable, and giving you a lot of different options to tackle different situations and different enemy encounters. And like Sekiro, there's also a bit more of an emphasis on parrying, or deflecting at the very least, with it being more of a base mechanic compared to Nioh, where it's an ability that you can unlock. But what makes parries especially good is a lot of enemies will have these unblockable attacks that if you are able to deflect, you will instantly stun them and set them up for a riposte, no matter how much their stagger bar is actually filled. And this might have just been the demo, giving you more things to play around with, but it felt like the game had a lot more special moves that you could do compared to Nioh, and it definitely felt like they 100% want you to include both weapon play, but also magic into your playstyle, and not just mid-max one of them. And that's where this spirit system kind of comes into play. Spirit, for all intents and purposes, is your stamina bar, but it works in a really odd manner. Doing things like those special moves, or dodging, or attempting a parry will drain your stamina or your spirit into that orange area. However, normal attacks won't, and in fact, hitting with normal attacks will fill it back up and push you into the blue area. It will always slowly reset to the neutral point no matter where you are, but it means that by attacking with normal attacks, you can sort of give yourself double the amount of stamina that you'd usually have. And it feels like the game really wants you to play as aggressively as possible, spamming that normal attack button and then occasionally working in either special attacks or magic when you can. It's a really cool idea in concept, but I really just didn't gel with it all that much. It felt like you ran out of stamina really quickly. Now, maybe that was because I'm a little bit spam heavy with the special moves because I wanted to see them, but there's a lot of weird design decisions, like the dodge is like a simple quick step, but it doesn't really go very far, and I didn't feel like it was all that useful for actually dodging. So I had to always double tap to do the roll, but that will always result in a quick step into a roll and just completely drain your stamina. And it results in a sort of combat style that I think fans of the Nioh series that are coming back to this and are really dedicated to the game will probably enjoy it a lot, as you get huge bonuses off of being able to pull off these parries and dodges. But I think to the average player, even somebody who's played through several Dark Souls games or Nioh or whatever it may be, are probably not going to be able to reap the rewards off of this too much. I feel like it's a game where if you know what you're doing and you're doing it right, you will absolutely obliterate every enemy in front of you. However, if you're trying to learn enemy patterns, you're just gonna die instantly, because it's a very glass cannon-y feel. You're either stamping enemies into the dirt or they're doing it to you. Whereas in Dark Souls or Nioh, I feel like you can at least lame it out and hold back, or focus on just dodging or just blocking, and sort of get a read on your opponent. In Wolong, when you try and do that, you kind of just lose your stamina instantly, and when that happens, you get blown up. So it feels like every time you throw yourself at an enemy to sort of learn its patterns, you've got about 3 seconds to do that, and then if you died, well, you've got to make the trek back to them once again. Now, I will admit, there is this new mechanic in the game that I feel like maybe because I wasn't really paying attention to it all that much when I was playing, could have been making it harder on me than it should have been. That being the fortitude level and your flags. Essentially, there is a little number on screen which is your character's morale. And essentially, the higher it is, the stronger you are. You deal more damage to them, and they deal less damage to you. Enemies, however, also have a morale level, and if they're a higher level than you, you will be outmatched. Theoretically, at least. I think the idea of the system is that you roam around taking out weaker stragglers to build up your morale before you take on big enemies in the area. And if needs be, you can simply grind your morale all the way up to level 20 and take out all the level 7 or level 8 enemies, even if they're supposed to be tougher. And a neat part of it is as you run around planting flags, which are essentially this game's bonfire respawn points, you raise your lowest possible morale meter. So even when you die and it goes away, you'll only drop to like 12 or 13 or 16, depending on how many flags you've got in the ground. What this did for me, however, is it very much feels like there is a linear order of how you're supposed to go through these very large open levels, as you'll get to a point where you've got a very large enemy who's several morale levels higher than you, and you go, well, I've just got to turn around, because even if I'm doing okay in this particular area right now, this person's 8 morale levels higher than me, and their damage is just going to scale with those. And at least to me, it felt like if I turned a corner and that did happen, then I kind of have to stop, turn around, and go, alright, where did I miss? Where do I have to go now? And the problem isn't necessarily the difficulty, it's more that the level design encourages you to explore in whatever direction you choose, and then the gameplay design wants you to go specific routes around that level, defeating the whole purpose of having open level design. On top of that, there's stuff like the loot system being back, which I'm not best pleased about. At the very least, they did reduce the sheer amount of loot that you do pick up from enemies. You'll now get like one piece of armor or one weapon from every couple of enemies or so that you kill, instead of every single person being a loaded piñata of stuff. But the actual loot itself is still an explosion of stats and information that I know you're only supposed to care once you get to New Game Plus, but that doesn't stop me from getting a headache every time I look at them. And with the new elemental affinity mechanic, I feel like it's not quite as simple as just hitting optimize every time you come to that screen anymore. At least with Strangers of Paradise, Jack and his posse always look like absolute clowns, so you could just hit optimize and forget about the loot mechanic entirely. But with this, there's enough variables where there's now potentially multiple weapons that you could be using and not just a straight perfect one for whatever you've currently got. And with the weight thresholds being there again, it means that optimization just might screw you over and give you way too heavy gear to do anything with. Finally, while the stealth and the new platforming stuff is pretty cool, it does feel very, very janky. It feels a little cumbersome, and getting up on top of ledges felt a little bit finicky at times, where I'd just be doing front flips into a wall, even though it was a very clearly marked ledge that you can climb up. But I will admit, it is pretty fun to jump off a ledge that probably should kill you, but because there's an enemy beneath, you can do an assassination style attack and survive all of the fall damage. So, I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little bit too harsh, and maybe a future demo might turn me around on the game, but as it currently stands, Wo Long is not something I'm terribly interested in. It feels mostly just like more of the same, but the things that they've doubled down on in this game is the stuff that I really didn't like in the previous Niohs. At the very least, though, it does have a really nice character creator. So, naturally, I made the most edgiest design I could possibly think of. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts on Wo Long as of right now. A much more negative video than I typically like doing, and actually longer than I thought it would have been, but yeah, that's it. But stay tuned for the new upcoming video on the Star Ocean demo, as well as our review for Trails from Zero.